Memory of a Killer, Fox's new crime thriller starring Patrick Dempsey as a contract killer living with Alzheimer's disease, is emerging as one of the most provocative and polarizing shows of the new TV season, drawing attention for both its high-concept premise and the risks it takes with sensitive subject matter. Overview and premise. The series centers on Angelo Flannery, played by Dempsey, who leads a double life. To his suburban neighbors, he is a mild, slightly dorky photocopier salesman, while in secret he's a longtime professional hitman working for organized crime interests out of New York. The show's central twist is that Angelo begins to experience cognitive decline and is ultimately diagnosed with Alzheimer's, raising unsettling questions about what happens when someone whose job depends on precision and secrecy can no longer trust his own mind. Early episodes repeatedly underscore the split in Angelo's life, morning routines in a quiet, tree-lined town where he dotes on his pregnant daughter, contrasts sharply with his trips into the city, where he moves through the back corridors of a restaurant run by his handler to receive orders that end in death. The series uses these contrasts, family versus crime, memory versus oblivion, to frame its larger themes about identity, responsibility, and the cost of violence. The first episode, Key Plot Beats. The premiere establishes Angelo's world in detail before pivoting into its central moral and psychological conflicts. Viewers first see him in domestic scenes that feel almost ordinary, tending to chores, checking in on his daughter, and playing the role of an aging salesman who blends into the background. Gradually, cracks appear. Small incidents, like Angelo discovering that he has stored his handgun in the refrigerator instead of in his usual secure hiding place, signal that something is wrong long before a doctor gives it a name. He struggles with simple numeric codes, briefly forgets instructions, and seems intermittently disoriented, details that the show presents both as plot points and as glimpses into the early stages of dementia. Against this backdrop, Angelo receives a new assignment from his handler, Dutch, a smooth-talking underworld facilitator who operates out of a Manhattan restaurant that doubles as a front for mob business. The target is Carl Mosher, an accountant tied to organized crime who becomes a liability, and Angelo is contracted to eliminate him. Episode 1 Ending and the Brother Complication. The climax of the premiere revolves around a revelation that complicates the assignment and lays the groundwork for the season's overarching conflict. Angelo discovers that Mosher is the brother of a previous target he has already killed, information Dutch and their employers intentionally withheld until Angelo was already committed to the job. According to breakdowns of the episode's ending, this twist forces Angelo to confront the human consequences of his work in a way he has long avoided. The man he is now asked to kill is not just another name in a file but someone directly connected to a family he has already shattered, turning what would have been a standard hit into a morally charged decision. The finale of the first hour shows Angelo making a choice that goes against his professional code and Dutch's expectations, leaving the hit incomplete and creating a dangerous loose end in the criminal world he serves. This decision not only angers his handlers, but also increases the likelihood of retaliation or exposure, particularly because his deteriorating memory may make it harder to manage the fallout. Family, illness, and threat. Running parallel to the crime plot is Angelo's relationship with his daughter, who is pregnant and largely unaware of his true occupation. Critics note that the show positions her and her unborn child as the emotional center of Angelo's life, the people he is most desperate to protect even as his past makes them vulnerable. Reports on the series indicate that a significant part of Angelo's motivation is rooted in old grudges and promises. A figure linked to a previous case has vowed revenge that could extend to his daughter, creating a persistent sense of danger hanging over her routine suburban existence. Early coverage suggests that as Angelo's condition worsens, his ability to safeguard her, both physically and by keeping his secret life hidden, will become a central source of tension. This domestic storyline is closely intertwined with the illness narrative. Nurses and medical staff who observe Angelo's lapses, such as when he forgets door codes at a facility or appears confused, are portrayed as potential witnesses to a discrepancy between his apparent frailty and the dangerous skills he still possesses. Analyses of the pilot indicate that the series hints at possible future intersections between the healthcare system, law enforcement, and Angelo's criminal past as more people notice that something is off about him. Tone, style, and influences. Multiple reviews describe Memory of a Killer as a genre hybrid, blending elements of mob thriller, character study, and disease drama. The pacing combines procedural beats, hits planned and executed, meetings in back rooms, underworld negotiations, with quieter scenes focused on confusion, vulnerability, and fear of losing control. Several critics point out that the series draws from European crime films that have explored similar setups, particularly stories in which aging or impaired assassins confront declining abilities. However, commentary suggests differing opinions on how successfully the Fox series translates that material into a mainstream network format, with some arguing that it pulls its punches on the more unsettling aspects of dementia while still using them for suspense. Visually, the show contrasts warm domestic color palettes in the suburbs with cooler, more stylized imagery in the city, especially in the restaurant sequences where Dutch holds court. This visual divide mirrors Angelo's fractured life and is frequently mentioned as one of the production's stronger storytelling tools. Critical reception: divided but attentive. Critics are sharply split on the overall quality of Memory of a Killer, though most agree that Dempsey's casting and the premise make it a notable entry in the mid-season lineup. Variety's review characterizes the show as muddled and bland despite its showy logline, suggesting that it doesn't fully commit to either gritty crime realism or an in-depth exploration of Alzheimer's. The Hollywood Reporter echoes some of this criticism, describing the series as silly at times and arguing that the storytelling leans too heavily on familiar tropes, from mob movie archetypes to a lone professional haunted by his past. On the other side, outlets like Decider and some fan-oriented platforms frame Memory of a Killer as a recommended watch, especially for viewers interested in seeing Dempsey take on an uncharacteristically bleak and morally complicated role. These more favorable takes praise the tension created by the protagonist's failing memory, particularly sequences where Angelo's lapses actively endanger both his assignments and his attempts to cover his tracks. Several reviews note that while the show occasionally falls back on exposition and cliché, the central question, whether a man who has done terrible things can meaningfully seek redemption while losing the very memories that define him, remains compelling. This conceptual hook, they argue, may keep audiences engaged even when individual plot turns feel predictable. Patrick Dempsey's performance and career shift. Much of the coverage focuses on Dempsey's performance and what it represents in the context of his career. Known globally for his work on Grey's Anatomy and for romantic or sympathetic leading man roles, Dempsey here plays against type as a weathered, morally compromised figure who spends as much time hiding his fear as he does hiding his crimes. Interviews referenced in reporting suggest that Dempsey was attracted to the part because of its psychological complexity and the chance to portray a character whose sense of self is under siege from within. Critics generally agree that he brings a weary physicality and a simmering desperation to Angelo, with small gestures, hesitations, repeated questions, sudden flashes of violence, doing as much storytelling as the dialogue. Some reviewers argue that the show works best when it stays close to Dempsey's performance, allowing viewers to experience the disorientation and dread of early Alzheimer's through his perspective rather than treating the condition primarily as a plot device. Even mixed or negative reviews often single him out as the element that elevates material they otherwise find formulaic. Supporting cast and character dynamics. Michael Imperioli, playing Angelo's handler Dutch, has been widely mentioned as one of the show's standout supporting players. Dutch runs an upscale restaurant that serves as a hub for mob dealings, and critics note that Imperioli blends hospitality industry polish with an undercurrent of menace, creating a character who can pivot from jokes to threats in the space of a sentence. The dynamic between Dutch and Angelo is framed as a surrogate family relationship. Dutch calls the shots and insists on loyalty, while occasionally invoking concern for Angelo's well-being, even as he pushes him into increasingly risky situations. This relationship becomes strained as Angelo's condition worsens and as secrets, such as the withheld information about Mosher's family connection, come to light, setting up a season-long clash over trust and control. Other characters, including Angelo's daughter and potential law enforcement or medical figures, are described in early coverage as less fully developed but clearly positioned to grow in importance. Reviewers anticipate that their roles, as potential confidants, investigators, or collateral damage, will determine whether the show deepens its emotional stakes or remains focused mainly on the cat-and-mouse mechanics of the plot. Ethical questions and portrayal of Alzheimer's. One of the most debated aspects of Memory of a Killer is its use of Alzheimer's as a central narrative engine in a violent genre series. Some commentators praise the attempt to weave issues of aging, illness, and cognitive decline into a mainstream thriller, arguing that the show raises poignant questions about autonomy, consent, and accountability. Others are more critical, suggesting that the series risks trivializing or sensationalizing a devastating disease by using it primarily to raise the stakes of shootouts and mob confrontations. Concerns include whether the depiction of symptoms is accurate, how respectfully the show handles medical and caregiving contexts, and whether audiences will view a killer with dementia as a sympathetic figure, or whether they should. The presence of Angelo's brother in a memory care facility, as well as scenes with nurses observing Angelo's early lapses, are cited as attempts to ground the story in a broader reality of families grappling with neurodegenerative disease. Reviewers note, however, that the full impact of these elements will depend on how they are developed over the season and whether they remain background color or become a true second narrative thread. Platform, scheduling, and audience prospects. Memory of a Killer is part of Fox's current drama slate, airing in a primetime slot designed to attract both traditional broadcast audiences and streaming viewers who will find episodes available on the Fox platform and Hulu shortly after initial transmission. The network's marketing has heavily emphasized Dempsey's transformation and the provocative premise, using taglines that highlight the danger posed by a killer who can no longer fully remember what he has done or what he is yet to do. Analysts see the show as a potential swing for Fox. If audiences respond strongly to the mix of star power and high-concept crime, it could become a mid-season talking point. If viewers are turned off by the blend of illness and violence, it may struggle to maintain ratings in a crowded landscape. Early discourse suggests that, whatever its long-term performance, Memory of a Killer has succeeded in generating conversation, prompting debates about representation, morality, and how far television should go in fusing genre thrills with real-world suffering.